Okay, Ross. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to explain a little bit about the visualization of how a Maslow pyramid works, right? And in extension of the insight that you found with graphing the pyramids. So try to follow along. I'm going to have to do a little bit of video editing to get the correct shape of this, but this is essentially what it'll look like. Okay. So currently, when you have, let's say, a Maslow pyramid, right? You have, your Maslow pyramid. You have essentially a structure that looks a little bit like this, right? So it's shaped with different layers. For the sake of simplicity, let's go ahead and just make it pretty simple. Let's just call this self-actualization. Let's call this love and belonging, and let's call this survival, right? So what we did before is that we saw that certain properties probably have different shapes of these pyramids. So let's say you have something that is an exotic property. Okay, so exotic property probably has a Maslow pyramid that looks a little bit like this, right? So it's very fat up at the top. Okay, maybe the love and belonging is not so strong, and maybe the survival part is also not so strong. So this can be things like a tree house, right? So a tree house is fairly exotic. Um, and maybe it's a camper van, right? A camper van is also very exotic. Both of these type of accommodations don't have a lot of, let's say, survival quality about it. It's not very comfortable. It could be, something else, but it is essentially that shape. Okay, so let's go with another example. The other example is a luxury property, and a luxury property we talked about already has a pretty thick self-actualization layer. It should have a pretty thick love and belonging layer, and it should have an extra thick survival layer because that also includes things like comfort. So really nice food, really warm service, and this possibility of becoming positively transformed. You can think of things like, like luxury spas, right? And such and such. So this is essentially one way to visualize the shape of a pyramid. But let's go with your idea, right? So your idea is essentially you have a pyramid shape, but essentially you have different thicknesses and thinnesses depending upon what you're looking at, right? So let's say this exotic type property here, how would it be represented in a pyramid of the same shape? Well, it would probably look like something like this, right? Where the majority of the experience is in self actualization, and it's very thin, once again, in the love and belonging layer, and it's very thin also in the survival layer. So this can be like, let's say, I don't know, 80% the experience, and this is 10, and this is 10. That is actually okay, right? So if you have that type of representation, it pretty much can convey the same information as your old graph right here. But here's the next level, right? If you have this type of information, then why not just use this type of chart right here? You can just use a bar chart, right? You can just use a bar chart, and this is 80%, and this is then 10%, and then this is 10%, right? So that would essentially represent the same thing. Okay, so luxury. How would you translate luxury into the other type of pyramid? Well, luxury is pretty well balanced, right? So luxury, if you translate it into the pyramid look, it would also probably look like, I don't know, maybe it's 30, 40. Oh, that doesn't actually make any sense. Let's call this maybe 20, 30, and 50%, right? So 20% up at the top in self-actualization, 30% in love and belonging, and maybe 50% in survival. But look, what we can do is we can translate that into a bar graph as well and just portray it like that. So the top layer is 20, the second layer is 30, and then the bottom layer is 50. So this is the final evolution of how you can actually display these different type of pyramids, and it's actually more elegant. So I think that can be used to help you actually figure this out. Okay. All right. Hopefully this video is helpful, and yeah, that can be a